Slowly reading from the book of Matthew today. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who had been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Then Jesus told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. The Herod summoned the wise men and secretly ascertained them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed from their own country by another way. May God add his understanding to these words today. You may be seated.
Crystal, thank you. You did a good job not singing as we read. I appreciate that. Very cool. Although singing would have been fun too. So we're on the 14th day now since Christmas, and we're celebrating this one last day for us to remember Jesus and his birth, and the day he's appearing to the wise guys, to the wise men. If we might leave Bethlehem, the house of bread, just briefly, I'd like to come to the present day, here and now, to help us maybe connect with the epiphany that took place when the wise men came. Epiphanies, how many of you hear epiphany used just in everyday talk? Do you hear it very often?
I've heard it a couple times last year.
A couple times? Yeah, a couple times. You know, I had an epiphany. I had a realization. Something dawned on me. I connected. I had an epiphany, and that's kind of what this is about. It's a dawning. It's an understanding, a new understanding. So Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and which means the house of bread. So today we're going to talk about bread. We're going to talk about food, the provision of God for the world, and we're going to come back around to Bethlehem, back around to Jesus, back around to the wise men. I see some funny looks.
That's not bread.
Oh, it's not bread.
That's definitely football.
It's definitely football. Oh, okay. Well, this reminds me of bread because there's a day coming up that here in the United States, it's the second highest day of food consumption in the United States.
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, that's right. Coming up Sunday, February 5th is the Super Bowl. A lot of food is consumed on the Super Bowl Sunday, second only to Thanksgiving. And so I bring this football today to help us understand the connection between food and the Super Bowl. A little bit of trivia. Guess what, how shall I put this? 8 million pounds of this was consumed, I think it was in last year's Super Bowl. Dip is close. I'll give you, pardon?
Hot dogs.
Nope.
Bread.
Nope. Dip is close. It's green.
Guacamole.
Guacamole. 8 million pounds of guacamole consumed in last year's Super Bowl. Isn't that amazing? So Super Bowl Sunday is a day of food consumption. But let's look below the ball game. let's look below what's eaten on that day, because God's provision is all over that day, but we don't see it. Because see, all the year through, the athletes on the field, they ate. They ate food that was the produce of the earth, which gave them the strength to practice, the strength to train, the strength to become the amazing athletes that they are. Alongside that, many people, like I guess last year, like 110 million people tuned in to watch the Super Bowl. How many of you watched it last year? Okay, a few. For myself, I hadn't ever seen it until 2 years ago. So I'm among you that maybe, how many of you have never watched a Super Bowl? Raise your hand. A couple? Okay. Raising your hands proudly. So some people, the Super Bowl is like a big deal, and others it's like, well, was the Super Bowl last weekend? Well, God's provision is sometimes missed. Sometimes it's missed because, so not only do the athletes, have they eaten food all day, all year long, but the people that take the video of it, and the commentators and the vendors and the trainers and the coaches have eaten food all year long, and without the strength and the energy of that food, it couldn't be broadcast. And for those who are watching it in their homes today, or in today's day, the people that run the power plants that provide the energy so that the televisions or screens and audio systems work, those people who ate food helped make the power possible to watch the Super Bowl. And beyond that, for all of those places, those who cleaned the stadium, those who cleaned the power plants, who picked up the trash from the power plants, so that those who are working on making the power and managing the power ate food all year long. And right here in our own communities, probably we take our trash and we put it someplace and it goes away, and we pay someone to do that. Can you imagine if those folks didn't pick up the trash all year long, what our neighborhoods and communities would be like? And they picked up our trash so that we could live in communities, so that we could thrive. And they ate food all year long. Without the strength of the food, they couldn't do the work. And so underlying the Super Bowl, so I put the football up there next to baby Jesus, because Jesus was born in Bethlehem, the house of bread. And one of the epiphanies for me that this story reminds me of is that in all the Christmas stories, do we read about Mary and Joseph eating anything once they came to the stable? We don't. That just doesn't figure in. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. They might have arrived in Bethlehem and had not only no place to stay, but didn't have enough money, and no one may have given them any food. And so Mary may have brought Jesus into the world on an empty stomach, in a cave in the earth, a stable, a cave in the earth. And so Jesus, who was born in the house of bread, bread doesn't figure as a big part of his story of his birth. Food doesn't figure as a big part of his story, because it isn't in abundance. It's not a big part. And yet Jesus, as we've just been singing, came to feed the world, to give his body, to pour out his blood to feed the world. Part of the Epiphany story, as the wise men come, to me, is a reminder that God's provision is there all the time, and it's for all people, It's not just for Jesus' followers. That wasn't in the beginning. It was for all people. And so one of the things that we can remember is that Jesus, who was born in the house of bread, came that all might have life and have it abundantly, that all people might have bread, including the Super Bowl athletes who are training now, and they don't even know who they are yet because all the playoffs haven't happened. We don't know who's playing. But all the athletes on all the possible teams in the NFC and AFC are busy eating and training for the Super Bowl. I wonder how much we give thanks for God's provision as we watch the Super Bowl and consume 8 million pounds of guacamole. Another epiphany. Another epiphany that I think might be even bigger than that. And that's weird to think that there could be something bigger than our daily bread, God providing our daily bread, not only to us, but to everybody who makes our lives possible. The people who maintain the roads, the people who maintain our cars, Mark, whose clutch cable broke this morning, the people who watch over us and take care of us and administer so many things that make your life and mine possible. So we read in Matthew, we're cruising along in the book of Matthew, and in a dream that Joseph hears, the angel tells Joseph, your wife will bear a son and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. He will save his people from their sins. Now, who are Jesus' people?
Jews.
Jews. His people. Jews. At least at this point in the story, it's just the Jews. And I shouldn't minimize that because that's Jesus' people. That's his life. That's his family. That's his heartbeat. The gift of Jesus is a gift of the Jewish people to the world. And Jesus came to save his people. And so at that point, as we read in the story, it's all about Jesus' people. And so I'm not a part of the story. I have no place in that story. I'm not Jewish. My parents weren't Jewish, and their parents weren't Jewish, and you go back. I'm not Jewish. And so that has nothing to do with me. It's almost like those of you that raise your hands never seen the Super Bowl. You know, it's like I have nothing to do with the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl has nothing to do with me. It just doesn't. Well, Jesus, to this part in the story, you'd read the story and, well, yeah, this is about another guy and another group of people someplace else, far off, and it doesn't have anything to do with me. It doesn't have anything to do with any part of the human family except his own people, which isn't bad, but that's all there is. And so God's blessing upon the Jewish people, pretty powerful blessing. But the rest of us, we aren't in the story yet. And we read a few weeks ago about the shepherds coming. Now, the shepherds were Jewish shepherds. We read that in Luke. And so, okay, yes, he's coming to save his people. And so the first people that see him are his Jewish brothers, the shepherds from the fields. So the house of bread, Jesus is born in the house of bread, Bethlehem, to feed his people and to save his people from their sins. But then, this is the epiphany, is that Jesus didn't come only for his people. I believe that Jesus came alongside his people, that his people, Jesus and his people, would be a blessing to all the world. And that eventually we come to understand that everyone is Jesus' people. And with the three magi coming, or we don't know how many, there were three gifts. We aren't actually told there were three kings, three magi from the east. There were three gifts. But we'll say the three magi. So they saw the same star the shepherds saw. They were not Jews. They were foreigners. They were aliens. They were Gentiles. They probably had some different colors of skin. Now, Jesus and his parents were probably darker skinned than this. But the three wise men might have had all different colors, 3 different colors of skin. They weren't Jewish. They didn't follow God. They weren't of the children of Abraham. But they saw the same star, the same light shining in the sky. And they followed it too, like the shepherds did. And those 3 wise men came. And they invested a lot of time and energy and effort to try to find this baby who was to be born king of the Jews. And so they find the king in Judah, which is Herod, and ask him, you know, where do we go? How do we find him? Where is he? And Herod says, check it out. Look for him. Let me know what you find out. And they check it out, and they're led to Bethlehem, to the house of bread. And they enter the house where Jesus and his parents are. It's a house now, because they started off on the journey with the star that the shepherds saw, and they had a long ways to go. So it probably was more than 2 weeks. It might have been months. It might have been even a year that they found Jesus. We don't know. But they came to Jesus. And Jesus received their gifts. Jesus received what they had to offer. Just as Jesus received what the shepherds had to offer, which was their praises, he received their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, expensive spices for birth and life, and all that's in between. Gold that can be used to buy food. He received their gifts and received them, and they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And so with the coming of the wise men, here's the epiphany, is that your story and mine is now part of Jesus' story. And so are people across the face of the globe, people that aren't God followers, aren't Jesus followers, because see, the wise men, where did they go after they left their gifts with him? Home. They went home. And they didn't become his disciples. They didn't become his followers. He's still a baby. They didn't listen to any of his teachings. He wasn't talking yet. He's probably, well, he might be talking if it was a year or so, maybe. But he certainly wasn't doing his teaching yet. And so these wise men left and went home. And they are heralded here in the Gospel of Matthew. And so as we look at the world around us, part of the epiphany to the wise men, with the wise men coming, is that I believe we can say that God receives the gifts that we offer to God, however they're offered, and whatever they are, and whoever we are. And even when we go back home, go back to our own homes, own religions, that God blesses that. The 3 wise men, the Magi from the east, astronomers, who saw the star, bless you, and wanted to honor Jesus with their gifts. As I've lived my life, there's been times when I felt deep in my heart very strongly about God and Jesus and my faith. There's other times when I've wrestled with it and had doubts and struggled with it. This story gives me encouragement because in this story I see God reaching out simply to a hungry world. God providing bread not only to Jesus' people, as in the Jewish people, and not only to Jesus' people, as in the followers of Jesus, but to everyone. To everyone. That's God's desire. That's God's hope. So on Sunday, February 5th, on Super Bowl Sunday, there will probably be another 110 plus million people watching the Super Bowl, and I may or may not, I don't know, I'll be visiting Anthony. I suspect that I might be watching it with him. He really likes watching football. But you know, on that Sunday, that God's desire is that everyone be fed. The athletes on the Super Bowl teams, most of whom are pretty wealthy, maybe like the wise man. God desires that the coaches and trainers and videographers at the Super Bowl and the makers of the ads, the commercials for the Super Bowl, be fed. And God desires that the custodians for Portland General Electric power plants be fed. And God desires that the folks who do Hillsborough garbage service for us be fed. And God desires that you and I be fed. And so on that day, when probably another 8+ million pounds of guacamole will be consumed, along with who knows how many million pounds of hot dogs and wings and barbecue and chips and dip and everything else. Around the world in places where there is no food, God still desires that everyone be fed. And so Jesus was born in Bethlehem, in the house of bread. He was born in a stable, in a cave with animals. He was born in the earth. And when he came into his own, and when he matured and taught, you all know that he fed. He wined and dined many, many people. Many, many people, including his followers and a whole bunch of other folks. He wined and dined a lot of folks, providing the wine at the wedding in Galilee, Cana, Galilee, feeding the 5,000, feeding the 4,000, sometimes inviting himself to other people's dinners, sometimes being the host. But when he comes to say that this is my body given for you, take this bread and eat, this is the man who was born in the house of bread, born in the earth. And when he comes and says, this is my blood poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin, that blood that's coursing through him was born in the earth, in a stable, and beheld by the shepherds and wise men. And just 24 hours after he shares this bread and this cup, he returns to the earth about 8 miles from his birthplace. This time not a stable, a cave for animals, but now a tomb. He returns to the earth from which he came. Just 8 miles from where he was born. Bethlehem, Jerusalem, not too far apart. Even today. I understand, I haven't been there, but on the map, about 8 miles apart. So the man who came to feed the world now returns to the earth. To feed a hungry world, to save his people, the Jewish people, to save his people, everyone. Sometimes we all need an epiphany. Sometimes we're struggling with a lot of stuff. Who are we? Who is God? Who's everyone else? What are my gifts? Am I worth anything? How much am I worth? Am I worth a lot? You're worth enough that Jesus came and lived for you and lived for everyone. So as we prepare to come to the table, hear the invitation of the baby born in Bethlehem. The baby who very early on shared his life with shepherds and kings and everyone in between. Dear God, thank you for sending Emmanuel, you with us in Jesus, a sign for everyone. Just as you sent a different Emmanuel many years before, a different baby born many, many, many years before to the Jewish people, exclusively just to them as a sign of your presence with them, you send Jesus now for his people and for all people. God, thank you for Jesus. And Jesus, thank you. Thank you for coming. And giving your body and your blood that Mary gave to you, that God gave to you, and sharing those gifts of God and Mary and the earth so freely.